Hello everyone, this is James from People of Many Fandoms. This is episode 1 of Convention Tips and Advice. Some of you may have seen earlier in the week, as long as I'm releasing these on the days they should be coming out, hopefully. Cosplay Tips and Advice. These are two concurrent convention related, obviously, because cosplay falls under convention, or sort of. But these are two concurrent series that are each going to have 10 parts. And then maybe some additional ones if people come up with topics I should talk about later on in the year. This is episode 1 of Convention Tip and Chips. Tips and advice. I keep thinking tips and tricks from bloody video games because I'm assuming we're going to do some at some point, me and Samantha. Where was I able to? Episode 1, choosing your convention. When it comes to choosing a convention, as I said in the cosplay one, it all comes down to a bunch of factors, but obviously there are different factors, of course. With conventions, it comes down to venue. This is like my rough estimation of what it comes down to. Venue, transport, accommodation, what is available there in terms of amenities and like things to do, and also whether it's going to be a solo experience or a group experience. No matter, and when I say group, I mean obviously 2 people, including yourself, or more, as opposed to just yourself. But best thing with choosing a convention, I'll start with. Oh, say another one's also cost, but that'll apply to everything else. Is transport. That, which also links into distance as well. But if you're starting out going to conventions, it's probably best to go to one which is probably not any more than about an hour's drive away, probably. So that you know you're definitely going to get back, whether it's someone bringing you, like parents or whatever, or a taxi or a bus or whatever, you're likely to get back if anything goes wrong in the early hours, because obviously most of the conventions happen is like from about roughly 9 o'clock till at least 5, so you should have enough time to get back, depending on obviously where you live in relation to your convention that you want to go to. But as I say, the best sort of starting area to go to, I mean, I don't talk from experience because my first ever cosplay convention was Collectomania 22, I think, in Milton Keynes, which is, I think it was about an hour and a half train ride, or hour and a half, maybe 2 hour half, 2 hour train ride south from where I live near Crewe, which obviously is not following my rule, but this is my suggestion I'm coming up with now, but you know, just yeah. It's probably just like, as a rule of thumb, it's probably just the best to get one which is close by, so that obviously, you know, if anything goes wrong, you are still close to home and everything can be sorted relatively quickly. Transport. If you can get there, if it's in an area where you can get there easily by train or by car, then it's probably your best bet. Then it's a good choice to go to. If it's somewhere a little more, you know, obscure out there, you're probably best waiting until obviously you've got a little more confidence into going to somewhere like that. Because obviously this isn't just convention talking about; it's events as well. Maybe like little charity events or something like that, because that also runs under how cosplay and stuff like that can work. But I'm trying to concentrate mostly on convention as well here. Accommodation next. If it's like a convention which is, as I said, about an hour or more away, it's probably best to maybe get a hotel room or a B&B or something like that, just so you're not having to rush every single morning to be able to get to the venue, because obviously some transport links don't work, don't go out as early as some other things, and also if you're trying to get sometimes in the morning, there's going to be a lot of traffic on motorways and freeways and whatever, so you maybe want to try and avoid that. But mainly, you can usually use, if events are roughly between 2 to 3 days in length, so if you can plan it so that you have a hotel which lasts from maybe the day before it starts to the day after it finishes, then you're probably in the best bet for that sort of stuff. If you're living that far away, if you're not that far away from it, if you live practically on the doorstep or maybe just a half an hour drive away, then it's probably best obviously just to go in every morning. But if you feel that it's going to be too much of a hassle if it's going to be, obviously you're going to lose sleep on it, it's probably best to get a hotel, because then obviously if it's in an inner city or something like that, as long as you're safe, you should have a good time as well, exploring like the cityscape and all that sort of stuff, and having a good time in the evening if you're that sort of person. If not, just stay in the hotel, watch the hotel room TV, or use the Wi-Fi if there's any available, anything like that, and then just wait for the next day, and then obviously keep going until it gets the last day, and then you're off home again, and then you can just reflect on what's happened. And that's going to be coming up in a later video where we talk about reflecting and thinking about your next convention, but that's obviously later. Are there any other facts I've thought about? Cost, that's another one. If you're going to be travelling a far distance, then you have to be sure to take that into your budget, because there's going to be a lot of cost when it comes to conventions. They are not relatively cheap, especially, I mean, even getting there is going to put a relatively sort of fair hole in your wallet, just depending on how unless you, like, as I said, just on a doorstep and you can just walk there and then you've hardly spent anything. But you have to take several things into consideration. Things that are going there, I'll say that again. Tickets is like the main thing. Some events, which are not like major conventions, are free to go into. But stuff like Comic-Cons or some lower like conventions but are still like on the map in terms of like there's enough publicity for them, will charge you somewhere between, this is going on British conventions, but like you can convert it to dollars or whatever currency you're in, from roughly maybe £10 up to probably a maximum of 50, depending on because tickets tend to vary. Like you could get day single tickets, or this is sounding like frigging bus and train tickets. Day single tickets, like you can just go to the day, or priority tickets, because some conventions open a bit earlier and lets like people with specific tickets to go in and obviously get started, so they don't have as much of a rush later on when the rest of the public come in, and then they're slightly more expensive. Or you can get weekend tickets if they take place over Saturday and Sunday, and then they're like a slightly discounted sort of double version. So rather than paying two separate single day tickets, you could get the weekend one, which maybe saves you about £2 or £5. And that's just tickets to get in. Most of the time conventions usually have guests, whether they're autographs or photo shoots. The average photo shoot or autograph ranges between £10 to £25, depending on like how much traffic they're expecting to get for certain guests and whatnot. Some like more higher up guests will obviously be charged more, because obviously they want to be sure that everyone who wants it will get it, but they want to obviously raise more money. So you have to be very careful about those sorts of things. But if you've got like a specific cast of people, and it is like cast, but yeah, if you've got a specific cluster of guests that you want to both talk to, get photo shoots with, or get autographs with, you have to take that into budget account as well. There's also food, but then again you can save money if you take a backpack or something like that. Get some food prior. Do not try and go for like the sort of the fast food sort of route and get a bunch of junk food, because yeah, that will give you the short boost, but with conventions you really have to keep your energy up. So yeah, you can get energy drinks. That's probably one of the best things to do. You can get energy drinks and squashes, but also make sure to take at least maybe a litre of water or something like that per person to keep their levels up, because I mean the energy will keep you going, but you have to keep hydrated, because conventions can get really friggin' hot, so you have to be very careful. Take sandwiches if you can make them yourself, or get them from a local shop. Savoury things, sausage rolls, pastries, pasties, whatever, as long as it's something, you know. I think savoury stuff, as long as it's not like burgers and hot dogs and whatnot. Try not to get stuff from conventions. I'm not trying to put them down for sales, but most conventions tend to charge through the roof for food. So don't lose all your budget just trying to get lunch on one of the days, and then you come to Sunday and think, oh, I can't afford lunch because obviously I've spent most of my money trying to get lunch yesterday, and you had to wait in all that line for a really expensive lunch that gave you energy for maybe an hour, and you probably had 5 hours left. It's probably freaking dust everywhere. It's always best to try and prepare, but food and all like that, it's probably best if there's a shop outside the venue or a supermarket or whatever. Get stuff get packed up, backpack, something like that, get your drinks, your food, and stuff like that, and that'll all come into the cost as well. And we'll come on to the, I think is the final topic. I might have missed one out, but I'm sure I'll come back to it later on in the series. This is episode 1, just like a summary. Is solo versus group experience. There is going to be a separate video on that, but this is going to be like the brief rundown of how to do it, of how to go about it when you're trying to decide what your convention you want to go to is. Sometimes it's best to go on a solo when you are more experienced as a convention goer, or you can do it as your first convention, but you have to be extra sure that you feel confident and relatively safe enough to do that sort of thing, especially if it's one that's really far away. So you make sure all your communications all up to date, you've got all your food and money and whatnot, and make sure you're as safe as you can be practically. There's nothing against starting off with your first convention as solo one if you want to just, like, you know, what's the expression, dip your toes into the water sort of thing, sort of try and experience it as a more independent one before you try and move up to, saying, taking a group of friends to it who, you know, enjoy the same thing. The first cosplay experience I had was with a mate I was doing filmmaking with at the time, and then we met another person on the train who obviously was going to the same event, and then we walked with him all the way to the venue, which was obviously Collectomania in Milton Keynes back in 2013. But it seems to be better when you are in a group in a group experience, because it gives you that little bit more support, and it obviously makes sure that you're covered in all aspects, especially if you've got a convention which is really far away. But as I said, I'll go into more detail about the solo versus the group experience at a later point. So that was episode 1, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, episode 1 of Convention Tips and Advice. Please be sure to check out our other series, which, if you haven't seen it, or whether you've been on Cosplay Tips and Advice and you come to this video on Thursday, because I'm doing cosplay blah 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 on Tuesdays and Convention Tips and Advice on Thursdays. I think that is the schedule, isn't it? Please be sure to check out Cosplay Tips and Advice if you haven't checked it out, and be sure to keep looking out on Thursdays for Convention Tips and Advice. We've got many different topics to go through. We've got at least 9 others on convention and cosplay tips and advice, and then any more if anyone can think of any other topics. But this has been episode 1 of Convention Tips and Advice, choosing your convention. I am James, this is People of Many Fandoms, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye, convention goers!